Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode here, a very special episode. I'm being joined by two amazing people, one in person and one via Zoom. Alla, welcome to the show, and Ben, nice to have you here with me.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me here. And three amazing people. You didn't count yourself, so.
Oh, true. And the baby that's
And
hanging out
baby.
still
we
in
got
here at the
four.
time of recording. Yeah, there's four of us
Yeah.
here.
Aw,
Four awesome
brilliant.
people about to have an awesome conversation. And I just want to start this by saying, Alla, we're so grateful for you being willing to come forward and to share your story, because this conversation we're about to have is no doubt very raw, authentic, intimate, terrifying, nerve sighting, all the things. And, I personally know how scary it can be to share these parts of ourselves and our wounding and our journeys and our healing. And, as you know, and one of the reasons why you wanted to come on and share how much this is so important to inspire others to find their path, right? And to take these steps. So huge shout out to you. And of course, Ben, to being here as well. I know your second time on the podcast, hopefully many more.
Many more to come.
Yes. Okay, so let's dive in, because I know we have
Let's do it.
there's so much that we're going to talk about today. And I've already introduced, how we know each other and in our little intro. So let's dive right into what is it that actually drew you to working with psychedelics in your healing journey? Obviously, you've been on a healing journey for a long time.
Yeah.
What was the guide there into using some of these medicines and substances to support?
What a great question to ask, and I'm trying to see how far I need to go in order to kind of build a picture. At the time, I was 28 years old when I first tried 29 years old when I tried ayahuasca for the first time. And I was coming back from living in Australia for 2 years, and I could just see my life going through patterns and cycles. It's like the same cycles would repeat. I would go into places of collapse and then depression and crying fits. And I was at a point in my life where I'm like, something's got to give and something has to change. And for me, growing up in Russia, growing up with a lot of neglect, I later on realized I had complex PTSD. I was on antidepressants probably from 16 to about 26. So I was living my life kind of like half alive and like numbing and trying to contain myself, because there are points in my life where I was going to school at BCIT and I was loving the program, but as soon as summer came and I didn't have anything to keep me busy, I would like fall apart. It's almost like the volcano, and everything that's been like I've been suppressing by staying busy would erupt. And so I could see these patterns being lived out within me when I was also traveling. Like everywhere you go, there you are. Like just because I go away somewhere tropical and go away somewhere new doesn't mean that my problems disappear, right? And so when I came back from Australia, I was at a place of, I'm like, I can't be going this way anymore. So what's the new way? And I had this beautiful friend who was angeling at ayahuasca ceremonies at the time. And I kind of say, like, she's like, do, 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 like, come over this way, right? Like this kind of like call from Mother Aya to go sit with ceremony. And that was the beginning of my journey. And I have to say that my relationship with plant medicines has evolved. And I kind of look back at seeing where my nervous system was at the time, where I was used to very painful experiences. I was seeking fast relief, quick fixes. And so I would do these deep dives into these plant medicines, and I would, have these epic experiences and understand rationally the themes that she was showing me or the medicines were showing me, but I wasn't embodied enough to actually integrate and change my life, right? So it was kind of like chasing the high and sitting and having these epic explosive experiences for my nervous system, but not having a way to kind of integrate it. So I love that the medicine was there to show me what was going on for me subconsciously, but it wasn't always a complete experience. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks for sharing a bit of that. And I think anybody who's listening to this that has dabbled in this world in different ways, whether it's
Mm.
for healing or for partying or for
Yeah.
like for fun, right? Has had a journey with it, and like with anything, right? The intention behind it and the medicine can really
Yeah.
change how it supports us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I also have to say that not every medicine is going to be for you. Like I also have to say this because just because somebody else is doing it may not be your medicine. And that came up for me when I actually started working with mushrooms. As soon as the pandemic hit, I started working with mushrooms, and they were actually teaching me how to grieve and slowly thaw out my body. For me, comparing experiences, I'm like, oh, this versus that, it just felt a lot more integrative in a way. So mushrooms were my and still to this day are my ally plant medicine. And they taught me a lot about grieving and emotions and really held space for me to like learn how to process some of the things that were coming up. And at the same time, because I was doing journeys by myself, it missed that somatic piece and that attachment piece that was so important for me to get from both of you in this journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. What a beautiful segue. Because the next thing that I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you was
Do
like,
it.
what, yeah, what did that journey look like for you, to choosing to come and work with us and to
Oh my
choosing to
gosh.
work with 3-MMC specifically? This is a
Yeah.
medicine that for everyone listening, I've talked about on the podcast before and is something that Ben and I work with. And yeah, it's a different it's not a plant medicine. It's an empathogen. It's a
Mhm.
different, totally different medicine. And we'll talk about a little bit about that, but not really focus too much on the medicine itself, but
Yeah. Yeah.
your journey with it today. But I'm curious, like how that unfolded. And you've kind of teased a few things
Oh
there,
gosh.
talking about the somatic and relational components. But yeah,
Yeah.
what helped you make that jump? And
Well, it's funny because I have to listen to the guidance of like sometimes I hear things in patterns, and I hear things people talking about, and it wasn't until I actually met you at this Women in Psychedelics dinner where there was you and another practitioner that were talking about the medicine, and I've heard medicine before, and I've heard of it as, oh, it's just a really long therapy session, and you have sitters. There wasn't any talk about what the benefits were or how it actually shifted or changed somebody. So for me, I was very cautious in entering this medicine because I know my pattern of like, oh, I'm just going to do another medicine journey and hope that it's going to fix me or do something or shift me in a way that I need. And so, as you remember, I said yes initially, and then I think it took me 2 months until I'm like, yes, I'm doing this. We're doing this journey. And the reason why this felt so timely is because 2 years ago I was rear-ended with a post-concussive syndrome. And I kind of joke because life is like, well, we're going to get you out of your head back into your body because you can't keep living out of here. And that's when my whole life unraveled, really collapsed, bottomed out, loss of job. I started working with a somatic therapist, which both of you know, and slowly started to explore what my body was so somatic therapy, I think, is so foundational because it's a bottom-up approach. It bypasses the rational brain and goes directly to what is the body communicating. And so as much as I was navigating my head trauma, it opened up of like, here's all of your wounds. And through my journey with my somatic therapist, it's almost like my body was helping me map out all of my shame stories, all of my belief systems. From the shame and belief stories, this is how I'm behaving in the world. Here's how I'm protecting myself. Here's how I'm limiting myself and my thought patterns. And so it gave me this beautiful foundation of like, here's a map of you. Here's a map of all of you, of all you've gone through, of all of your experiences. And I knew that I could continue doing somatic therapy and slowly heal. And at the same time, I'm like, well, it's already out here for me. What was missing is kind of like putting it back into place, if that makes sense, right? Like I've opened myself up and it's like, here's all of me, but how do I put myself back together and begin to integrate it and move on with my life? And so when actually talked to my somatic therapist about doing the journey, I'm like, yeah, I'm exploring, I kind of said it's an MDMA derivative journey. And I'm like, it's actually this and this. She's like, you have to do it. She's like, you have to do this journey. So her encouragement was the kick in the butt I needed in order to say yes to this. And I have to say, I was really, really scared doing this because I've had really, really traumatizing trips before that. I'm like, can I do this? Is it going to be just as bad? I'm like, I've been to the bottom before. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be at the bottom anymore. So, and I have to give big shout out to both of you, Danny and Ben, for just holding the most open, safe, sacred space for me to be like, here's what's coming up. Here's my timeline of my traumas. And here's the reason why I'm wanting to do this, right? And so for me, just being held and in this space, and the fact that it was facilitated as a man and a woman, because I've up to this point I've been avoiding working with men as practitioners. It's been working with a lot of women facilitators. So for me, I'm like, ooh, this is a new edge for me to sit with a male, to be witnessed and to be held in ceremony. It was new. So I just want to say that was kind of like the big picture of why I just decided to say yes. Mm-hmm.
So beautiful. And we're going to talk about that piece. I'm so excited to get
Mm-hmm.
into that piece. I'm curious, actually, just
Mm-hmm.
intuitively feeling to pass the mic over to Ben here for a second. For those who have never heard of 3MMC before, could you describe it briefly in like, like quick synopsis as we explained to Alla, before, for those curious, like what makes it so different? Why do you like working with the medicine? And as Alla, you've already said, like it is a 2-on-1 model, which I think makes it quite unique compared to a lot of other medicines as well. But yeah.
Yeah. So, where do I start? Usually, if anyone is familiar with MDMA or maybe had any partying days back in the day, yeah, it's a synthetic and it's has many similar characteristics to MDMA, but it is a much longer journey. So usually it's anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, depending. And yeah, the beautiful thing about the medicine is it really just allows the inner healer to come out. And I'd said this before, Alla, when I was kind of explaining it to you. And I'm actually curious,
Mm-hmm.
does that make sense now?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Like, I get it now.
Yeah. So I'd love to touch on that in a sec. But yeah, it's a synthetic, and it's basically like my experiences with the medicine. Often feel like a warm kind of it's like a warm safety,
Hug.
yeah, hug kind of come over. Is That's my experience. So is that yours? Is it like going into it, or
Before the nausea hit.
yeah, yeah,
I'll do it again. Let's just say that.
yeah.
I love how you described it, Ben, because you've described it to me before. And I think because of my journeys with previous medicines, I've always dove deep into like, here, we're just going into the depth of what we're exploring. So for me to be able to have this beautiful containment of, it feels good. And I think I laugh about this now because there's multiple times through my journey, I was like, oh my God, this feels crying. And I'm going
Yes.
through my like trauma release and I'm like, I feel so good.
Yes,
And I'm like,
healing can feel good.
and I'm like, and healing doesn't have to be painful. And I'm sitting there hugging myself and I'm like, thank you, medicine. Like, just in biggest gratitude of the medicine because it provided this beautiful levity of the things that I was processing, which some of the things I was processing weren't new to me, but it gave me an ability to have my observer kind of like detach and observe me, just kind of acting out the things that I need to act out. So it was just such a beautiful kind of holding container and space for me to be in the medicine and to be held in such a loving way. So definitely not going back to anything else.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Just the loving way, and yeah,
Mhm.
creating some of that safety to go to
Mhm.
allow the body to go where it needs to go. And that's what I mean
Yeah.
when I talk about this inner healer coming out. That's really how I think of it, is like, okay, body's feeling safe enough now, and I need to talk about this, or I need to express this, or I was really sad when this happened. And it's just like, and then you follow that thread.
Yeah.
And that's usually how the journeys unfold, as far as just giving space for that inner healer to come out and
Mhm.
support them. So
Mhm.
yeah, it sounds like that was makes more sense to you now.
Yeah.
It
I
totally
remember when
does.
you first explained it to me, because Ben did his training with this medicine before I even knew about it and was starting to work with it, and then got me into it. I was like, let's try this. I remember you talked about it being kind of like like the people pleaser parts just no longer can exist, right? Like the ego goes to the side. This
Yeah.
medicine works. We're not going to get scientific because I don't even know all the science of it. Like, right, it turns off those parts of our brain and puts our ego aside, quiets them, right? And you become just like ultimately like direct in like, this is what I need. And you have no problem asking for what you need, what you want. Like you just kind of become the boss. And then I also in my own experience have called it often like a truth serum as well, because it's like your inner
Mhm.
healer just starts telling the truth. And sometimes you're like, where did that come from? Like I have no memory of that.
Or why did I need to say that? Or
Where
Yeah.
why
did
did
it
I
come
need to
from?
express that?
Yeah, so it's like this, yeah, it's almost like just what like the inner healer just totally takes over and is like telling the truth about all the stuff that really needs to come out. And you're like, oh, this
Yeah.
is so refreshing. And
Yeah.
I love how you brought that piece in, because I think I'm thinking of my audience and obviously the work that I do and the topics that we talk about emotions, and how we can actually exist in this place of feeling a shitty emotion, shame or grief
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
anger. And at the
Yeah.
same time, be like, this feels so amazing to express,
Yeah.
like to hold both, to be like, I am like so sad right now, but it actually
Mhm.
feels really good to be sad right now. And
Mhm.
I don't think we ever really have that experience in our culture, right? We just get into the like heaviness of feeling sad, as an example,
Yeah.
right? Versus like, wow, this feels so good to let out and to express and to cry
Yeah.
and to be witnessed in and all of that. So, uh, yeah, I think beautiful potential there.
Mhm.
There's so much here. So
Mhm.
So much goodness.
so much goodness. So let's dive a little deeper.
Yeah.
Whatever you're willing to share,
Mhm.
Alla.
Mhm.
I know everyone listening would love to hear
Mhm.
more about your journey. So what
Yeah.
was your actual journey like
Ooh.
for you? And I'll let you sit with that for a second, because I loved what you wrote earlier. You sent me a little bio for yourself, and I wanted to read that out loud because I think this really sums it up beautifully. And then I'll pass it over to you. So you shared that you discovered how much wounding you had towards men, and how Ben's healed
Oof.
masculine presence actually helped you access your anger
Yeah.
in a safe container, explore your power as a woman, and be supported through rebirthing into a new version of yourself.
Oof.
Obviously, very small part, but also
Yeah.
big part of the journey. There was so much more. So, but I loved the way you wrote that, and I wanted to read
Mhm.
that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, in your own words, what was the journey actually like for you? And yeah.
What a beautiful, thank you so much for summing that up. And the journey, as I look back on it now, is almost what I journeyed through, felt like I went into the inner child. So the wounded inner child within me that felt victimized and felt unheard and unseen, and that my needs didn't get met. And I was asking for a lot of reassurance, and I was asking for a lot of support that way. So I had to acknowledge the victimized part within me because it lives in my subconscious, right? And so if I don't address that little part of me that felt victimized and felt hurt and felt wounded by her parents, and by not being able to express myself and my emotions, and had to just be like a tight little ball, and to find ways to people please and appease everybody else, to then stepping through a journey of like, oh, okay, so, and I was asking for a lot of and Danny, I love how you reflected back to me. You said I was asking for a lot of validation from the two of you, right? Like I was asking for a lot of validation. I was like, is this okay? Is this okay? Can you tell me this? And can you tell me that? Like reflected back to me, to then second half of my journey going into like, oh, I get to actually do this for myself now. And there's a beautiful ceremony where we went through a process where I think I was talking at my mom about how hurt I was, and how much her behavior hurt me, and how she didn't support me. Um, at the end, what happened was I actually kind of was able to be like, I get to be my own parent now. Like I see my mom as the wounded person that she was, and I get to step in and be my own parent now, and to give my little girl everything that she needs. And so it kind of separates that victim consciousness to like a creator. I'm like, okay, I see her wounds. It was passed on to me, and this is where it stops. And I get to say like, no, this stops here, and I get to now take my life back. And one of the most, oh my gosh, like one of the most potent, it still sticks out in my mind when I was telling you how hurt I was and that I was hurt by your words. Ben like instinctively came in between the two of us, and he kind of looks at me and he looks at you and says, you cannot talk to Alla that way. And I might get emotional because I think that's the piece of my own, like I never had a parent, father, or a male step in and protect me that way, to just come in and say like, your behavior is not okay and you got to take responsibility for what you're saying and you need to get support. And I remember crying, I'm like to Ben, I'm like, thank you, I needed to see that, because I think my wounding starts from my own inner judgment towards males. And I've expressed this, and I'm happy to share more on this, of males not stepping up and males being, and this is my judgment, and I no longer hold this, but men being cowards and not stepping in and being protectors and providers in a way that a woman needs to be provided and supported. And so, oof, I just can feel it in my gut. I'm like, it's that aspect of the mirroring I never received as a woman of what a masculine, healthy masculine protector looks like, and not ever embodying that within myself, because I didn't have access to boundaries. I didn't have access to anger, which we'll talk about in a little while. So to me, I kept going into people pleasing, collapsing, and placating, right? So, and then I would flee. I would flee the scene as soon as I could, as soon as they came to and the danger was gone. So my own inner protector wasn't online, right? So not receiving that as a child, not seeing how a man stands up to injustices and stands up and protects his own kin, translates to me not embodying that within myself, right? So that's my original wounding with the masculine, of just not having that blueprint of what protection looks like, right? And so that was I think pivotal point. I'm like, oh yes, this can happen. This is what it looks like when a healthy couple can talk about what's going on, where they're projecting all over their child, their traumas and their wounding, and they can go like, that's not Alla's responsibility to hold, or the child's responsibility to hold. We get to be responsible for that. And I think for me, one of the biggest themes for me to undo in this journey was the responsibility. I took way too much responsibility as a little child to play the savior to my parents, to do anything I could to appease them and please them so they could come out of their own pain and maybe give me what I need, which was the creation of my own people pleaser complex, right? Like that overfunctioning, like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting my needs met. That must mean that I'm bad, I'm some sort of monster, I'm unlovable, I'm all of these things. So how do I not feel those things? By behaving in a way that may get me some love and attention, right? So that's where my overfunctioning people pleaser really kicked in, as super early on, of like trying to save my parents from themselves. And that's a lot of guilt that actually came up during the journey, of like not being able to save my parents from themselves and not wake them up and not be able to show them that something else was possible, right? So I know
You
that's a
took on all that
long-winded answer, but
responsibility.
yeah, take all of that responsibility and really just untangle that. And I think that was the pivotal point where Ben, as the masculine, stepped in between the two of us, was like, oof, it almost like cut the cord of like, that is the new imprint, that is the new blueprint. So that was a very, very powerful experience. And the other piece, I think, as a woman, and I'm not going to dive deep into, patriarchy and how that's wounded all males and females at the same time, because it created conditions for us to exist within a system that's harming both of us. But as a woman, hiding my power and hiding my truth is just a self-protection piece, right? Because I think in the past I have been when I spoke out or I said my piece, like the amount of times I've been let go from jobs by males, like there's been a lot of kind of um, my own mother's inner masculine that harmed me for speaking up, like her own inability to contain her reactions and lash out and rage and anger towards me was harmful. So I just learned to not really speak up or stand up and be in my power. And so it's just, there's another piece where I think at some point I was reclaiming my power. I love that, like, you had a deer skin that I put on my body, and I put this deer skin on. I had my flower crown on, and I'm like in front of the mirror being like, I am powerful.
Yeah.
Ben's holding my hands, you're drumming behind me. And I felt this like beautiful energy of like, when we stand in our power, everybody wins. Like, it's not power over, it's not Ben is more powerful, I have to contain my power to like raise him up to be powerful. It's not me misusing my power over others because I feel wounded and hurt, so I have to feel powerful, and you have to be less powerful than me for me to like gain some sort of control over you. I just felt this, like, I'm like, the more I stand in my power, the more I stand in my truth, the more I shine, everybody else gets to do the same. Like, and I just kind of felt like really powerful to do it with a male alongside of me, and like you as a sister, like drumming me on, like that was so, so, so beautiful. Yeah.
Love that. I love that.
That was a special process. I mean, every piece of
Yeah.
every day in your journey was so powerful and so special.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just feeling the space for, yeah, everyone can
Mhm.
exist here in all
Yeah.
their power, and
Yeah.
there's no power over, power under. I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's the piece, like, yeah, that I'm always curious about, right? Like, why can't men be in their power and women be in their power, right, at the
Yeah.
same time, and then we can both be
Yeah.
powerful together, right? And can we honor that our power is different, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, in my beliefs, a lot of the feminine power is our creativity and our
Yeah.
softness and our ability to feel and intuit, and and men's power in a healthy way, has different qualities, right? And doesn't make one better than the other or less than. And how beautiful world it would be if we could like come together with that.
Yeah.
I want to just like pull something out of what you said and just explain to the audience. I'm
Mhm.
thinking of people who may
Mhm.
be confused about you yelling at me during your journey. So one of the cool things with this medicine that Alla is just talking about is we do role play. So
Yeah.
when you were sharing that, I was embodying your mom and Ben was embodying your dad. And we actually get to go in. This is one of the such cool things that this medicine helps us do when working with trauma. And we can actually go into those old patterns and reenact essentially what
Yeah.
should have happened, right? And
Yep.
create a new neural pathway of,
Yep.
okay, this is now a situation where young Alla had her dad come in and step in and say, you can't talk to her like that, right? And give
Mhm.
her mom a piece of his mind and make her stop it and go get the help that she needs, right?
Yeah.
So just that dynamic, I just wanted to pull out
Yep.
for people as you spoke so beautifully to the process we went through. I mean, it can look like so many different ways, but I personally just find that one of the most fascinating pieces of this medicine is we can go in and I can step in and embody your mom. Ben could be your dad or whoever it is that needs to be there. And that's one of the special things about us as a team, having the masculine energy and the feminine energy. In that experience, we can really embody a lot of family members or a lot of people who have wronged us, right? And
Yeah.
step into that and act things out in a way that should have happened and
Mhm.
kind of, yeah, recalibrate and get what we needed.
And you spoke to it well, Alla, when you said update your blueprint, and it
Yeah.
sounded like even just
Mhm.
in that moment, like I got this sense that you like could feel that in your body, like just
Mm.
having a masculine, like a healthy masculine, stand up for little Alla in that moment.
Mm.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Mhm.
yeah, is it like it's not just a cognitive thing, right?
No.
When you're in there, it's like, holy shit, like thank you for saying that. I remember you
Mm.
saying those words. But yeah, I could just really feel like, oh, it's like the body is taking that in. Is that right?
Yeah. This medicine is wild because it takes you where you don't know you need, like, and like you say, it reshifts the experiences, and it almost gives me a new experience of what could have been, which I've done a lot of grief work around. um Grieving the kind of the fantasy childhood that I thought that I was going to get, or the parents that I was going to get, right? So in a way, subconsciously, it almost rewires shows me what's possible and puts that, helps it to kind of put a nice little bow to it. It's like the scenario has been completed. And I don't know if folks have done constellations work, or you've done constellations work, or internal family systems. That's what it feels like. It's like there's parts that come into play, and it's like tick 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 tick, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, this is a healthy embodiment of the expression of what I never received. So now I can tuck it away in my brain and be like, okay, that's what I need to do for myself as well. It's okay for me to say that's not okay. Please don't talk to me like that. It's almost like a permission giving of like, this is the new normal. I don't have to tolerate harmful behavior, you know, from myself and from anybody else, really. And so that was a beautiful kind of piece that really clicked in for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if that's shown up for you since the journey. Like what are some of the pieces that you've actually seen like manifest or show up for you in the aftermath? It's been a few weeks since we've actually done this journey together at time of recording of this.
I honestly think it's been so subtle but so like potent. I've had a lot better boundaries with myself where, okay, it's 9 o'clock, we don't look at the phone, like we're going to bed. Like I actually started the Artist's Way, which if anybody knows what the Artist's Way is, it's a 13-week journaling practice. It takes you through 13 chapters. I call it trauma recovery, really, because you're connecting to yourself through journaling practice, and then you have to take yourself on artist dates, right? Like you take your little inner child on dates every week. And so every morning I wake up, I'm like, I look forward to like writing in my journal and connecting to myself. I'm like, what will I have to say? And it's become this like beautiful sacred practice of like, what's my higher self telling me? I can ask questions and like I get downloads of what the next pieces are, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. Like I have a connection to myself, to my inner healer, which showed up on the journey. I am holding a lot more gratitude towards relationships, because part of trauma and attachment wounding, I know that I had a lot of attachment wounds where it's almost like, because I never was made to feel important, I don't often make my relationships important, right? Or disqualify them or disengage from them. And I had this big grief wave came through me, which happened because I also was able to access my anger, and we can talk about my anger release later on later on, that happened in the ceremony. But I was able to flood through the grief cycle really quickly and come out on the other side of like, oh wow, like, okay, I'm grieving this relationship because it was really, really important to me. And it's almost like life is showing me relationships are important. People in your life are important. I didn't give enough gratitude and give enough energy to this relationship, and it ended, and I withdrew for my own reasons because I was going through my own trauma in my car accident, so I wasn't able to show up in a way that I could have. And now it's a guiding post of like, give more gratitude to the connections and people that you have in your life. Like, so it's almost like life is showing me like, okay, this is the past, forgive yourself, you didn't know any better, you can now do better now here. And I've been focusing on building community more. I've gone to a song circle with women. I've gone to, I'm like signing up to do Toastmasters because I want to become a better speaker. Joined Zumba classes at the I just freaking love Zumba so much. If anybody's done Zumba before, it just like brings out so much joy for me. And some of the biggest things are my nervous system has gone through such a deep reset that I'm no longer chasing and to talk, freedom, we talk about this, Danny. I'm no longer chasing the high of sugar. I'm no longer chasing the high of caffeine, which I used in order to regulate my nervous system. And I didn't know that I was doing that, right? And so these addictive patterns and these things that I was trying to feed myself was for me to feel a certain way and to balance my nervous system that felt depleted and collapsed, right? So now I have more access to my own aliveness, through journaling practices, like you need to come back to your body. What does your body need every day? Movement, dancing, like I'm like burning incense more. So I'm like more in my aliveness and this back into the senses, really. So like I'm back drop deeper into my body. So I know that's I'm like, it's only been 3 weeks. Like, holy.
You're back. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Welcome back
Is
to
this
life.
what it feels like to be alive? And I actually messaged my somatic therapist and I said to her, I'm like, thank you for pushing me to do this ceremony because I feel like I got my life back. You know, and it just felt like I'm like, this is what could have been if not for trauma, right? So this is and I actually had a lot of grief come up around feeling angry towards being traumatized, which I had to rumble through and being like, oh my God, trauma stole my life. And I'm like, okay, we can put that to bed and I can go through and I'm like, and now I get to create my life the way I need to create it post-trauma. So who am I post-trauma? And that was a big, I'm like, who do I get to be? Like, I'm like, I get to be anybody, really.
Yeah.
The world's my oyster. And so that shift from like not collapsing into the despair of like, oh my God, life was really tough and, you know, middle finger to trauma, which I tend to stick to, I was able to process and get back to like, well, what's the hopeful outcome? The hopeful outcome, I now get to build a life based on what I never received, but I have the responsibility to create it in the way that I want to create it. So there's this beautiful like hope and will to live and to see what goodness I can really bring in, right? So
Wow.
it feels like a full circle moment, right? Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
Just wow.
Wow.
Just, yeah. I can't add
Thank
anything to
you.
that. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
We're done. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Job's here complete.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Mm.
Would love to come back to what you just said we could come back to, the anger.
Mhm.
Let's
Yes.
talk about
Oh my
anger
gosh.
and then let's get deeper
Yes.
into this masculine conversation because
Yes.
yeah, this is potent.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting because uh, I grew up in Russia where anger was, I was surrounded by anger. My father had anger issues. He had his own addictions with alcohol. My grandfather served in the Second World War. So, you know, as a 16-year-old boy, I don't even know what kind of shell shock trauma he would have carried forward with him raising his daughters, my mom and her sister. I remember he would get angry at me if I didn't put something away in the right spots, you know, so, and then my mom had anger issues. And so I was surrounded by anger. And the interesting thing about anger is as a child, I wasn't allowed to express it. I'm surrounded by it, but I'm not allowed to express it. And I remember reading somewhere, I follow a lot of, I love the nervous system, like I love geeking out on that, where it said that if sadness isn't allowed to be expressed, it turns into anger. And if anger doesn't, oh no, if grief doesn't get allowed to be expressed, it turns into anger. And then if anger is not allowed to be expressed, it turns into depression. So the anger goes inward and creates these like stored energy. So the body has to store so much energy in order to not express anger, because I was actually punished by a lot of anger in my life and harmed by a lot of anger. And so for me, I was afraid of anger, and I was afraid of the misuse of anger. And it created a lot of collapses in my nervous system, and makes sense why I would always go into people pleasing and then freeze mode, right? Because it's almost like I want to go towards my caretakers, I need connection, but they're also dangerous to me. Like I'm also afraid of them. So it kind of created this freeze mode. And what I realized about anger is, as a woman, if I don't have connection to my anger, I don't have connection to my inner protector, that inner justice, because when anger shows up, it's like, whoa, something's going on here. It's like danger, danger, warning. This is not okay. And if I don't have contact with my anger, it actually disempowers me and my full expression, and it traps me in not being able to complete grief cycles, because anger is part of grief, right? So I would always go into collapse into sadness because that was safe for me to go into collapse into sadness, but I never had access to anger. And what I realized is there's a lot of anger that came up. I expressed a lot of anger in the ceremony through my body. So the beautiful thing about this medicine is because when the protectors are off, the body gets to express, and the words get to be expressed in the way that the inner healer knows how to express it. And so a lot of my processes were actually me on the ground having like tantrums, like full on meltdown tantrums, where I'm lying there and I'm shaking and I'm just like, from the outside you could like look, she's like having like a seizure or convulsing, like that's what it probably looked like. For me internally, my body's like, we've held on, and it takes so much resources from the nervous system to hold that anger energy in. This is where it, I think, manifests in inflammation. This is where it manifests in all sorts of ways, to a point where I'm like releasing all of that. And at some point I remember saying, I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted because I've been holding on to this for so long. And having Ben as the safe masculine present, I was able to go into anger without being punished for being angry, if that makes sense. Because a lot of the times, if I expressed anger or anything towards my mom, she would come at me verbally, harshly. She would come at me with shame and guilt, and at times there was, some physicality from her. And with men, I remember this one point where my father got angry one night. He was drinking, and he came, and my brother and I were playing Atari, and he literally came in, like, because we were having fun and enjoying ourselves. He came in and smashed it, right? So it's like I was always kind of surrounded by this, like, oh, anger is not safe. And then, so I think that taught me, like, it's not safe to express anger. Like, so if anger is not safe, then for me, it's not safe to express anger. And there was one beautiful point at the end of the journey where I think a lot of my body has processed a lot of the anger just from living and needing to express it. There's one last release where I told Ben, I'm like, I think we need to like do an anger release. And we went back into the house, and my inner healer said, okay, Ben, like stand right in front of me. And we did this like pushing. So I was pushing against Ben's hands and pushing and like really expressing frustration and anger and pushing somebody away from me, because I didn't have that access as a child, right? Like I couldn't push people away. I couldn't really do anything with it. So that felt really powerful. And then Ben, thank goodness for your space holding. There was a release where I was on my back with my legs pushing onto Ben's chest as he was kind of like above me, and we were pulling each other's arms this way to create tension. And I told Ben, I'm like, come at me with your angriest face, like come at me with like your angriest face, your anger. And to be able to sit there and to be able to look at him and his expression and to face it and to kind of create this tension, where to a point where I pushed Ben off and I said, I'm not afraid of you anymore. And then kind of I went into what I would call a rage release of like no more harm. Like no more harm gets to enter the space. And it felt like it's almost like part of my inner masculine was able to reclaim that like inner protector. Like my inner protector came online. So like that's been so life-giving, to be able to access my anger, to be able to have healthy anger, because I know anger can harm, but there's healthy expressions of anger that are my inner protector, really. And then, so to me, to be able to go through that ceremony and to be able to have Ben, knowing that I was safe with Ben to express these things, that was like the most healing thing I could ever do. Like, and Ben to show up for me in that way from a masculine standpoint was the safest way to not judge my anger, to not recoil in it, to not think that I'm, doing it, like not taking it personally. Like that aspect was so healing, because I think, I don't know if I'm the only one as a female that hasn't been in situations where somebody's anger hasn't harmed them in a way, right? So that was big, and so I think in that aspect, that's the part that I was really avoiding going into, that part of my anger, because I thought that I would harm somebody, if that made sense.
Mhm.
Like I would picture myself of like, if I release my rage, if I release my anger, I'm gonna like, there's gonna be harm done, and that's also maybe part of why I suppressed it so much. But also on the other side of my anger is my power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, like
Heck yeah.
what a joke. Like we're afraid of what the most powerful thing that's available to us, and when it's comes back online, I'm like, ooh, like I can stand taller, I can carry myself better. It's like there's like a part of me has arrived and came back online. So really it's my power that I was afraid of all along, right? And it expresses an anger, is injustices towards causes that are happening. It's like, this is not okay. Like, all of those bits and pieces get to be kind of come back online now.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, I love
yeah,
I love hearing that recap, Alan. I
yeah.
get chills, just yeah, having you talk about
Mm,
it and brings me back there. And you really summed up well the process of, okay, here I was growing up. It was unsafe around this unhealthy anger. You weren't allowed to be angry.
yeah,
I just pictured
yeah.
this little one like pushing this stuff down. And
Hmm.
then we go into a journey like this, and you're able to like complete that like survival response, that like
Yeah.
that pushing and actually being able to, push me off, push through. And as you say, your power is like just on the other side of that. Yeah, so
Hmm.
I love just hearing that, because it's
Yeah.
very much the
Hmm.
relational somatic therapy approach,
Hmm.
to working with
Yeah.
trauma and anger, and
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a mobilization. That's the word that comes
Yes.
up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's why we do a lot of
Yeah.
physicality with something like anger, somatically
Yeah.
speaking. It
Yeah.
needs to be really moved. It's like thick and viscous, and we need to punch a punching bag or like
Yeah.
pull or push a wall or these things like,
Hmm.
because it's just so in there,
Yeah.
right? And there's that
Yeah.
mobilization of that energy
Yeah.
that you access and a lot in so many beautiful spots, right? Using Ben
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um, yeah, that was healing for me as well, to witness you two in that process, and
Mm.
to like, I'm so grateful to get to live with this man who gets to
Oh,
support me in
yeah.
that healing, and our future son and
Goes
all of
both
that.
ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I am curious, Alla,
Mhm.
maybe you'll have an answer to this, maybe you won't, but
Mhm.
what, like, do you think it would have been, do you imagine it being different if you were going through the same processes with a woman that you felt safe with?
Because I have to give credit to myself, because I've done so much work on myself leading up to this point, and I had a beautiful somatic therapist who was a female, where I was able to express some levels of anger, and some I'm like, oh, I think I'm angry, and I could go to the ground and like beating up a pillow, right? Like expressing it. I don't think I would have reached the same level of healing, um, as if it wasn't for having a masculine counterpart. So I, for me, don't think it would have been as profound and as deep if it was two females holding space for me. And I'm sure there might have been some other things that would open up, but the fact that my brain was registering male, dangerous, like subconsciously, like walking around before this ceremony, before this journey, I'm like, male, dangerous, anger, bad. um, I've been in avoidance with working with males, right? So to me, it's that avoidance that's actually kept me from growing and from going into the wound and healing it and putting a beautiful bow on it. And my comment about me having, so this is the other piece I think about repressed anger. Repressed anger, to me, it creates this um, levels of judgment, if I can say that. If I'm not expressing anger, if I'm internalized anger, so I'm judging men for not doing their work, I'm like, oh, you're a coward, why aren't you like healing, why aren't you stepping up, why aren't you protecting yourself? um, the anger piece that I worked with Ben kind of, it was able to complete a grief cycle for me, because there's earlier in the ceremony where I expressed a lot of hurt and anger towards my father's addiction, right? So it's like I was so hurt and angry at his addiction, and then it kind of, I'm like, and then it I'm able to float above it and be like, that's a trauma response, right? So it's like my grandfather was traumatized, my father was traumatized, and what trauma does is it affects us in different ways. And so my father wasn't able to show up for me in the way I needed him to because he didn't have people showing up for him, right? So it's like it's almost like that generational trauma. Like I can now have access to the biggest compassion of like, I see you, I love you, thank you, and I get to take over now, right? So having been able to express that anger with a male has taken off that judgment lens that I was carrying, and I was able to now look at males and give more compassion to their journey, because this work is not easy. It's not to confront your own demons, to confront your own subconscious beliefs, and to be able to change is the biggest gift. Healing is a gift, and we are not stuck in our patterns and behaviors. And at the same time, it takes effort and it takes a lot of courage. So I am now in a place where I can be with men and have the most compassion for them. I could see their goodness and be able to cheer them on, you know, and just believe in them, versus before having such like internalized anger towards males prevented me from showing up in a healthy way myself, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that makes
Makes a lot of
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and if I just feel like called to add in one little piece here from my own journeys, because I've had, I of course have my own man
Yeah.
stuff to work through, and that I've been working through, and that's come
Mhm.
up in my journeys. And I must say, I've noticed, I've probably had more female sitters for my experiences with three, and there's sometimes like I've needed to do pushing, like express anger around the masculine stuff as well. And I gotta say, there's been a like sometimes there's a holding back I can feel because my body doesn't trust. Like if some of my wounding's not wanting to hurt women, and especially with if I'm bringing up anger, there's like a bit of disbelief in my from my body in actually being able to fully release that when working with a woman. um and that's a lot of my own stuff, but yeah, that's just kind of interesting to, I don't know if that kind of relates to what you're saying a bit.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's kind of been my experience too. So just one of the benefits too. Of course, I've had lots of amazing healing with working with amazing women teams, and I just think, yeah,
Yeah.
there's it can be really helpful
Yeah.
as well to have one
Mhm.
masculine and one feminine as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
so
for
glad that
sure.
you brought that in. Because I think a lot of women, you know, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation is like we so effortlessly start focusing on healing our divine feminine, gathering as women doing this
Yeah.
work, which is so important. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother podcast, a whole nother conversation. But we've
Mhm.
almost swung so far the pendulum one way
Yeah.
that we forget about how important it is to have men in our healing journey, because a lot of our wounding has come from that, right?
Yeah.
Giving our power away, having it taken away,
Yeah.
like all the things, right? All the ways that men have misused their power, right? Now we have
Yeah.
all these complexes about it and judgments and all the stuff. So
Mhm.
seeing men, I know we were at a festival recently, and
Mhm.
just like I'm just such a proponent of like men's work, you know, men
Yeah.
doing the work together and seeing men do that. And
Yeah.
there was a men's circle, there was like 50 of you, and I was showing up for the next workshop, so I was there like 5 minutes before you guys ended, and I remember just watching like what these men were doing together and like owning their sacred healthy masculine power so that they could show
Mm.
up and protect the women and be
Mhm.
kind and not misuse their power. And I just remember bawling my eyes out like witnessing this. It was so powerful, and it just felt like
Yeah.
so important to like even as the feminine to like support men in doing that, like
Yeah.
gather with other men, like please do this work, right? And work with men so that you can actually, because there is that very real energy, like, you know, to like if your wounding is around having, you know, your ancestral line having hurt women, and the men that we know of that have like spent their lives hurting women in one way or another, and you don't want to do that, right? You're going to hold back, right? You're not going to scream at a woman or share your full anger with her because your references, anger might hurt women.
Or wanting to be witnessed by a male,
Right.
because it's just there is, for me, let's say there's more connection there in dealing with an ancestral line around the masculine.
Right.
It's like, hey, dude, witness me in this, right? Like, I'm not alone in this, right? Like, you're here. So
But and perhaps even like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm intuiting like this energy as well of getting to practice or stand in your sacred healthy masculine by telling another man what's not okay. Right? Like being like, you can't fucking treat women like that.
Yeah.
Right. And like getting to actually be in like, I'm repatterning this for the next generation. And here's my new masculine power. And I need you to see that you can't treat women like this anymore. You can't do that anymore. And like kind of have that reflected back. Yeah.
Totally.
It feels so important.
It's such a big conversation, and this is the thing, because what I realize is the more I become safe within myself, the more I will be safe for a male, if that makes sense, right? And I've been actually really, really privileged to be part of male-led inipi or sweat ceremonies over the last few months. I want to say over 6 months I've been going consistently. And to be in ceremony and to hold space for men as they're navigating their emotions, and to make it safe for them to show up in their emotions and to express it. And because we carry both male and masculine within, or masculine and feminine within us. And so both have to be some sort like integrated, or we're out of balance, right? And so to me, to be able to witness and cheer men on, and I've always been a supporter of men doing their gathering as men, and talking about the things that are going on in their lives is so healing for them. So they're not lone wolfing out there. They're not, sitting thinking they're alone in their struggles, and to have that community. And also, I do believe that as a society, we've gone so far from initiations, right? Males used to be initiated into their manhood. Now there's drinking, partying, drinking and drinking.
More drinking.
Yeah.
Maybe some fighting and roughhousing.
Yeah, like the level of like punch-ons, as they call them, what I experienced in Australia from males who get drunk and literally get into fights. I'm like, there's a piece that there's initiations that are missing. And it's so important to now come together, I think, because like you said, Danny, women have been slowly gathering and healing with women, and we all have like women. I shouldn't say that's very all or nothing. I have a lot of feminine wounding as well around sisterhood. And now that I know that, now it's like, can we come together and heal and share our stories? But it's like, I think both parties are still kind of afraid, will I be met in my truth? Will I be supported and seen in my emotions without being shut down, right? So it's like, we're all learning to navigate this and these conversations are really, really important and necessary, because we're all trying. I do believe that there are folks out there trying to heal and do better, and it's a messy journey. It's like we're gonna mess up, and grace is so important, and forgiveness. Oh my gosh, that's the other piece that I've learned from the ceremonies. Like, forgiveness is so important. Forgiving myself, from holding myself to higher standards than I was able to achieve when I was traumatized. Forgive others, like, just creates so much openness to that, relating in a way that I'm like, I can see your humanity now. Like, I don't have to hold you to a high standard that I used to hold myself, because that's my perfection. And so we were on a big, beautiful precipice of change, and I feel it. And so for me, doing this work for myself to heal myself is so I could show up safely for men as well, because I haven't always been safe. I've torn men down because I felt their power was too much, because I wasn't in my power. So I'm like, oh, you don't get to be powerful. I've emasculated men. I've done all of these bits and pieces because I was wounded myself, right? So it's like, when I see somebody in their power and their full expression, if I carry shame around that, I'm not gonna be super supportive in you being in that, right? So it's been all part of my healing journey, and I can sit and look back and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is where my wounds showed up, and I can only ask for forgiveness and forgive myself. And like my latest thing is like, know better, do better. right? Like, and the more life teaches me about how to be in my healthy expressions, the more I can show up um, in a better way for myself and everybody else, right? So yeah, it's been a humbling journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
And ongoing,
And
right?
ongoing, and
And
then
ongoing.
it continues, and I'll mess up and I'll be able to forgive myself and ask for grace from other people, and it's just we're all doing our best, unlearning some very big knots,
Yeah.
right?
Grace, compassion, forgiveness. I love that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
important. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I can always use more of that in my life. I'm sure many people would
Don't.
probably resonate with that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. We're all still
Oh,
work in progress, but
right.
yeah, I've been
Totally.
absolutely loving this conversation, and thanks for being up for it, Alla, because I know it was a
Mhm.
big theme that came up for you in your,
Mhm.
and Ben, thank you for bringing your pieces, because
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk for hours about this, right? And
Mhm.
there's wounding for all of us, like you said, on
Yeah.
both sides, the feminine and with the masculine. And when it comes to the masculine piece, it can be really wonderful to have human
Mhm.
males who are also doing the work, willing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
hold that space and support in that process. And in reverse, as you've mentioned, like we as women can, I mean, men carry a lot of the
Mhm.
feminine wounding as
Yeah.
well.
Absolutely.
Like you're even owning up to some of the pieces. I know I've hurt men in the past as well too. Like, and
Mhm.
men are, I have such empathy for men in this and what I see in this day and age.
Yeah.
Like they're so confused, they're lost, they're demasculated. You know, the feminine movement has taken over, and they're not even sure how to be men anymore. And it's like, yeah, it's confusing out there for all of us, and really
Well, and
beautiful. And we can come together and talk about
Mhm.
that and
Yeah.
support each other in that
Yeah.
balance and honoring our differences.
And that's why I think it's important because it's like the not having an imprint of a healthy masculine has affected all of us, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just women, it's also men. And I really thought about this. I'm like, yeah, the wars that where men are being sent to wars and creating trauma, them coming back shell shocked and trying to parent kids who are then raised like you grow up with their own traumas, and then it gets passed down to us as kids. And um, addiction kind of gets thrown into trauma management, like all of those bits and pieces. Like we're all kind of now in this place of renegotiating what healthy looks like, right? Because we're affected. A lot of single moms out there raising kids by themselves, and so little boys don't have um, an imprint of what a male supporter looks like, right? So then there's imbalances where maybe I can't speak to this, but maybe males show up a little bit more in their feminine because they don't know what the masculine side looks like because they didn't have that role model, right? So we're all in these beautiful harmonized imbalances together, trying to come back to our true nature, really. And that's the importance of having men's group, women's groups, because they're all supportive in their own ways, right?
And then maybe women and men's groups,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like,
can't wait. I
right?
honestly, I really am
Space together.
desiring that, right? Like,
Yeah.
really
Yeah. Maybe we need to
desiring
create
that.
something, Ella. Maybe the three of us
Yeah,
need to create something. We're not too far apart
yeah,
from each other, but
yeah.
yeah, I think, I mean, there's some spaces for that, but not in the same way. But I think that's
Mhm.
beautiful. We can take the work that we're doing separately and bring it
Yeah.
together to have more of these conversations,
Yeah.
and others.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Planting the seeds for
Yes,
later.
yes. Let's see what 2025 brings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
Okay, this has been awesome. I want to be respectful of both of your time and everybody
Mhm.
listening. I hope that this has been really powerful. So as we start to slowly wrap things up, I'm curious from both of you, is there any other, any other pieces that feel really called to be shared, spoken to before we wrap things up?
Ben?
Let's see. I feel like we have to tell the audience about the buffer.
Oh yeah, Ben
Oh
was
my
you wanted to
God.
bring the tote of
I
goods.
wish
It's
I
downstairs.
had it.
You were ready.
Can
So-
you, oh my God, can you please talk about the buffer?
Okay. So we have a tool called the
That shocks
buffer.
all of the people we work with. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a car buffer, and
Quite literally.
and yeah, we can use that to help just break things up in the body. It can be really
Yeah.
helpful for if somebody's stuck in like a freeze mode or in shame or just getting like pulled down. But yeah, do you want to even just? I think you were a
What's your
fan of the
experience?
buffer. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to
I've
speak
never
to
seen
it?
somebody use the buffer so much. Buff me again.
Okay, so first of all, not only did you have the buffer, but you had, was it a 20-pound blankets,
The
weighted
weighted
Oh,
blanket?
yeah, the
blanket.
weighted
Yeah.
Oh my
blanket,
God.
Yeah.
So the next day when I went to like pick it up, I'm like, this is so heavy. And I made Ben like put it on me probably like 20, 30 times. So he got his workout through it. Thank you.
yeah. My pleasure.
But the beautiful thing, and that's what I realized about like doing any trauma processing and healing, is the containment piece, right? So when I was navigating some waves of energy, or if I just went through like a full body tantrum, like that energy needed to be contained. And so having that weighted blanket on me plus the buffer that like literally vibrates on top of my body, and I've recently heard that we store a lot of trauma in our fascia, right? To be able to go in and like to buff it and vibrate it. And it's sometimes I told you, like, just hold it over my heart because there's so much energy there. I'm like, just hold it over, and to have that kind of vibration on my body felt so safe. Like it felt so contained. And if I can end on a piece of like, our bodies are incredible, and the journey to get back into the body is not an easy feat. And the more I'm in my body, the more I befriend my body, the more my body's like, I am just here to support you. I want to love you. But as a little one who experienced so much pain being in this body because I didn't understand what's going on emotionally, and it was just so much, having a part of me dissociate was just a safety mechanism I needed to, in order to survive. And so to be able to bring those parts back into our bodies, like, we have the capacity to heal ourselves, which is a miracle. We have the capacity to restore ourselves back into our whole untouched self, because there's a part of us that's whole, complete, and intact. And to bring these pieces back into this body and to live from this embodied way is the future. Like, that's what I think life is trying to get us back into our bodies, and through all of these triggers and emotional processing, it's like flood through it, release the energy, because the body and the nervous system knows how to restore itself. We just need to remove these ego protection mechanisms and be able to let the body process all of it. So that's been like the biggest gift from this journey of just having these blocks removed, so my body could heal and restore itself into a more balanced way. So I'm just really grateful for both of you for helping me shaman myself back and rebirth myself. We had a rebirth ceremony on medicine. We drummed, we danced, we did all the things. So I just really am grateful for your support and the importance of healing together, both sides.
Yeah. Well, thank you
So
so much
beautiful.
for just showing up and doing. I can't think of a better word than the work, but thank you for all that you've done, Ella, and just getting a little taste of your process and your journey and the path that you've been on. It's really inspiring. And thank you so much because it is a choice, and hearing you talk about that intergenerational trauma, it's like, you're choosing, no, like, this is a new path that I'm going to rewire, and it's going to be different going forward. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Aw, thank you both
Yeah.
so much. I'm so honored.
Yeah. This shit ends with us.
Yeah, yes.
Shit ends with us.
Yeah.
I'm curious, one final question quickly.
Yes.
What's next?
Oh my gosh.
What's next? I want to hear from all of us. Because by the time this episode airs, it'll be a couple weeks before this episode comes out. But curious.
What's next is I'm just learning to follow my curiosities. For me, it's now stepping into like, what's my service, what's my work, what's the next phase of my life that I'm wanting to build. And there is a part of me that I'm like, okay, I've learned from chaos, I know what that looks like. I'm like, how do I build with stability, with this new nervous system, with this new way of being? And there's a lot of unknowns, and I'm a little scared, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I've never experienced it before. All I can say is I'm feeling more ready to share. I'm feeling more ready to show up and to serve in a completely different way. So I have no idea what's next, but I'm here for it.
Yay.
Maybe this podcast is what's next, right? Like sharing your journey and
Yeah.
leading the path and sharing with others. And so excited to watch that all unfold over the coming months
Yeah.
and years. Alla. Yeah.
And what about you two?
Yeah, what's next over here, baby?
Baby.
And then, and then
Maybe baby will be out by the time this podcast happens.
baby might be in the planet Earth here by the time this
Aw.
episode comes out. So that'll be my focus for sure for the next 6 months to a year, and then
course.
hopefully getting back into this work and getting back
Yes.
into more somatic work and breath work, and
Yeah.
getting back into some more in-person stuff. I just keep being reminded of the importance of being able to touch each other and look into
Yeah.
each other's eyes and just be in the energy in person. So, yeah.
And to
everybody
be
listening, look
held.
forward to more of
Oh, to
that.
be held through
Yes.
all of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You have
Yes.
to do it alone.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No
No.
more lone wolfing. No.
No, that was the old way.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Out with the old, in with the new. Community,
Yeah.
collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah.
And while I'm busy, feeding a baby, what are you up to? What's next for you?
Doing laundry
Like,
and
yeah.
feeding you.
Good, right answer. Correct answer.
Yes.
Let's see, I'm gonna have some protectors that aren't too happy with me stating this, but for me, it's just more stepping into this work. I find it very rewarding, especially getting to work with people like you, Alla, and just be able to hold space for your healing is very inspiring. And I certainly hold myself back and have been, just because it's still newer for me, and so I have my own fears around just stepping into my role as a therapist and space holder. So that's me, just continuing to push that edge.
Yeah.
That's
You're
what I-
doing it.
And
I
Alla,
already-
you're here
yeah,
to
and-
support you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, I know this amazing man, Ben, who can hold space for you.
You're so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate the gentle pushes. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I do just want to say, honey, like, it's such an honor to get to hold space with you and to
Aw.
work with you. I feel, it's just, I mean, obviously there's that connection there from just being together for 15 years, and it flows so nicely. And thank you for being one of my cheerleaders and supporters, and I can't wait to work more with you as well in the future. So,
Yay.
yeah.
Thanks,
You
honey.
too.
Aw. Yes, but please don't wait for me.
I won't.
I'm gonna be busy with a baby, so logistically it'll be hard for me to take an 8-hour day to support a client. But you can do it.
Yeah.
You have to do it on my behalf.
Perfect.
You have to do it. You have to do
Aw.
it for me. Yeah, more of this work for all of us.
Me
and-
too. Oh, my
Yeah.
heart just flutters seeing you too.
Aw,
Oh,
aren't we cute?
You're adorable.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for being here, and everybody listening to this. I hope that you've really enjoyed this. This has been, such a powerful conversation, and Alla, just to witness you and to hold the space for you to share. Again, coming back to what I said in the beginning, I know it's vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? To
Thank
share these
you.
parts of yourself, and I hope that your vulnerability and our vulnerability, and every time we share this, really gets to inspire at least one of you who is listening to this episode to find spaces to be safer, or to be vulnerable, right? In safe space, right? We
Yeah.
often get continually wounded because we're like, oh, I'm going to go out there and try to be vulnerable. And we do it in the wrong space or the wrong
Mhm.
person, right?
Yeah.
So, be cautious who you share these parts of yourself with, and make sure that you could be held in that. And there's lots of people out there willing to do that, whether it's a new friendship or a somatic therapist or anything in between. Find those people and start leaning into that vulnerability and truth, because this is how we're all going to heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
Those
on
are
our
the-
little paths. Yeah.
Yeah. That goes for everyone listening too.
That's who I was talking to.
Oh, okay. Great.
Who do you think I was talking
Sorry,
to?
missed that.
Yeah. All you
To the
listening,
wall.
watching.
To
Talking
the
to you.
wall.
Talking to you. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, let's leave it at that. Thanks again,
Yes.
everyone, for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode with someone you love. It helps me incredibly reach more people and help more women who need this information. And if you're ready to go deeper into discovering your unique root causes and patterns keeping you hooked on sugar year after year, be sure to come and check out the brand new free root cause quiz that will give you actionable items to finally begin healing your relationship with sugar from the inside out. You can find the link to download this quiz and other amazing resources in the show notes below. I also wanted to just take a quick minute to share a disclaimer. The information provided in this podcast is for general purposes only and is not at all intended to be professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And as much as I do my best to bring you up to date and accurate information, please remember that I'm also sharing my opinions, stories, and ideas that are ultimately not supported by mainstream science. My personal advice should not be taken as professional advice, and you are always encouraged and advised to consult with your own healthcare practitioner before making any changes to your health and wellness routine. This podcast is intended to inspire and offer you alternative views to healing your relationship with food, mind, and body. It is up to each listener to take responsibility for their own health and wellness decisions. I hold no liability or responsibility for your results or lack thereof. Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast, and we can't wait to see you in the next episode. Let's go.